Amazing. So let's get started. And sorry, no. Okay. So let's start with the definition. Well, probably the most familiar word in Hebrew is aliyah. It can be spelled with an H in the end or without an H, but aliyah is basically an ascension, right? So I can speak of an aliyah to a bus, and I can speak of an aliyah to the promised land. And normally when we speak of aliyah, we're talking about Jewish immigration to the land of Israel, because Jewish immigration to Israel is a spiritual ascension. It's not just moving from one state to another. And therefore, if a Jew immigrates from Israel to, let's say, United States, so we call it yerida. Yerida is getting downhill, descending. So if aliyah is an ascension, so Haapala is a difficult ascension. Okay, that's what it literally means. So you can see these guys on the left, and they're actually hiking uphill. These are the Atlit Mount, and they are actually in the middle of Haapala. Right, that's the meaning of the word. We don't normally use it. We normally use the word hike or other words. So when we use the word Haapala, we are talking about the illegal, the clandestine Jewish immigration during the British Mandate, which is also known as Aliyah Bet. Okay, so Haapala, Aliyah Bet. Aliyah Bet is because Aliyah Aleph, the first Aliyah, is the legal one, the official one, and Bet is the other one, the illegal one, and Bet also stands for BT Legalit, which is illegal, okay? So, moving forward, again, here on the right, you can see, well, this is a very well-known photo of the Exodus. We will be back to Exodus towards the end of the presentation. And the Exodus brought about 4,500 of Ma'apilim, these illegal Jewish immigrants making Haapala. Now, there are two English words for Haapala. One is the illegal immigration, and the other one is clandestine immigration. Some people are allergic to the word illegal, okay, because people feel that the British had no authority over us, and so they don't use the word illegal. I will be using this word simply because it is easier to pronounce. Okay, it's not because I'm judging these others. Okay, it's not an official and legal, and that's what it is. So, well, you can see the definition on the left. And here you can see some of the numbers. We're talking about approximately 140,000 people who illegally entered the Palestine, under the mandatory rule. And we're talking about 120 ships, and about half of them were stopped by the British patrols. Now I'm talking about approximately because we don't really know. When we're talking about something which is illegal, we are trying to keep it secret, and therefore quite a few immigrants, they were never caught and they were never actually identified as such. Some of them married locals, some of them pretended to marry locals, some of them were students, and the bottom line is that we don't actually know the real number, but approximately we're talking about 140,000 people. Now, for you, again, as Americans, things are bigger for you. And so maybe 140,000 doesn't sound like that many people. But I would just like to remind you that at the day of the Declaration of the Independence, okay, when the Jewish state was declared, and when the war began, the War of Independence began, there were about 600,000 Jews living in Israel. That's it. So we are talking about over a quarter of them were, or about a quarter of them were illegal immigrants, having no rules, no rights, no papers. And that's why I started with sort of the apology that the Haapala topic deserves much, much bigger presentation and more time than it's going to get here. Well, we have something which is called the or the unorganized Haapala between 1922, which is the first Arab uprisal against the British authorities and against the Jewish population here as well. And that's until 1934, which is considered to be the first year of the official Haapala effort, which was performed by the Jewish Agency and some other forces, which we will be addressing in a minute. But during these years, we're talking about some 12 years, we had quite a few ma'apilim, which came overland, mostly overland, crossing the border between, well, Israel and Lebanon and Syria. Hey, Yossi, I can see you back. I'm sorry. Hi, Yossi, I missed you.
Thank you. It's been very busy. I've been prepping for the holiday. You know, there's a lot of prep.
Okay. So most of these pre-Ma'apilim crossed the border overland from present-day Syria and Lebanon. They were accepted and I would say adopted by mostly Kfar Giladi and later other villages and kibbutzim along the border. And then they were distributed among the kibbutzim, mainly kibbutzim all over Israel. So this is the overland Ha'apala. And then we have tourist people who came, let's say, for a Maccabiya and just stayed, you know, they never came back. So they're considered to be Ma'apilim as well. And then we have students, most of them registered as students of the just established Hebrew University in Jerusalem and later the Technion and other institutions. So again, they came legally and then they just stayed illegally. Some got married, and the total estimated at 50,000 immigrants. This is, again, this is like a tiny little village in Detroit, near Detroit, but this is a huge amount of Jews at the time. So the organized Ha'apala, what we normally refer to as Ha'apala, this is the stage before the war, 34 till 1939. And we are talking about total of 21,000 ma'apilim, which used total of approximately, well, so the 50 ships, sorry, that has to do with a mistake, forget it. But 21,000 ma'apilim, among which about 12,000 were organized by Beitar, by the revisionist movement of the Jabotinsky. So these are the symbols of the main organizations which dealt with it. This is Beitar, this is Af Alpi, which means nevertheless. And this is the Hachalutz, which acted under the umbrella of Hahagana. Those of you who've been to the military Israeli bases, and I believe that most of you, that look quite similar because this is part of the sign which every officer gets. So this is phase one, which was successful, but partly. And it started again in 1934 by a ship called Velos, which is officially considered to be the very first ship of the Ma'apilim coming from Europe, even though there was another one which was organized by the revisionist movement, which was called Kuchav. Kuchav means a star. Here she is, and this is something we call the forgotten ship. You know, we have politics. We always have politics. So even in the study research of Ha'apala, somehow Velos, which was organized by the Jewish Agency, became the first, considered to be the first ship, even though it was the second. So we have Velos, and then we have Union, and then we have Velosby, and that was it. This sign here, it says Mitzpeh Ha'apala. Oh, I lost my annotation. And Mitzpeh Ha'apala means the lookout of the Ha'apala. And it's located on a beach, which is my favorite, near Moshav Beit Yanai. So behind here, you can see the houses of Beit Yanai. This is a beautiful place to live. And this is the beach where the Ma'apilim of Velos disembarked. successfully. So that was the beginning, but it was not really, really successful because of lack of money, because it was too difficult, because they couldn't agree, because people were not really sure that it's worth the effort. You know, it's so difficult, it's so pricey. Maybe there are other better ways to bring Jews into here. And that was the case, and that's why actually there was no Haapala after this first year, up until 1939. And 1939, well, we all know this year very, very well, because obviously this is when World War I started. But right now, talking about Haapala, this is the first year of Hamusad Le'aliyah Beh, the institution for the illegal immigration established by Ben-Gurion as part of the Haganah. The Haganah is something we normally refer to as father of IDF, and these are the paramilitary underground organization, part of the Jewish underground movements, which were fighting, but gently, against the British authorities. I will not say more right now about Haganah, but the Hamusad Le'aliyah Beh, the institution for the illegal immigration, became part of the Haganah, and it was established by Ben-Gurion because of two main reasons, both of which took place almost a year before the actual establishment of this Mossad, and both happened in 1938. One is the Crystal Nacht, the night of the broken glass. I'm sure we all know the term. And the night of broken glass changed the rules. This is when Ben-Gurion finally understood that what we need to do with whatever it takes is to save Jews from Europe. That was a turning point for him. That was reason number one. And reason number two was something which was called the Woodhead Committee, which was a British committee which arrived to Palestine, to the land of Israel, in order to fix the Peel Committee map. Okay, this is a lot of terminology, and again, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but what I want you to see, okay, I do want you to look at this little map, okay. You may recognize that this is, well, central and southern part of the state of Israel, okay. This is the Dead Sea, okay. I'm missing the northern part, but it's not such a big deal. So this is the map which was drawn by the Peel Committee in 1937, and that was their suggestion for the partition plan. In other words, they suggested to divide the land between Jews and Arabs, okay? But that was their map. So the green area was supposed to be an Arab state, okay? While the, well, pale bluish strip here, okay, it had more to it, a bit more to it up north. That was supposed to be the Jewish state. That's it. Well, this yellowish worm, okay, this one here, that was supposed to belong to the Brits, and that included Jerusalem. Okay? So this map was suggested by the Peel Committee, and this map was not accepted by the Arabs. And therefore, in order to fix things and make Arabs happier, because being unhappy, they started the Great Arab Revolt against the British authorities in 1936 and 7, even worse. The Woodhead Committee was sent, and as a result of the Woodhead Committee, the third white paper, which looked like this on the outside, was published. And the third white paper, well, it stated quite a few things, but generally speaking, it was about the limitation of the Jewish presence and possessions and abilities at the land, including a quota. And this is something which is really important for us to keep in mind. The quota meaning how many certificates, how many legal Jewish immigrants are allowed to come and settle here, okay? So the third white paper stated that the maximum of certificates of legal immigrants are 75,000 in 5 years. Okay, that happened back in 1938. So that's it, 75,000. And Ben Gurion realized that this is something we cannot live with. And so he blessed, okay, the Haapala, which he did not really do before because he didn't want the Brits to be too angry. But after these two events, he understood that he has no other choice. The organized Haapala actions, well, they had so many actions, including purchasing sheep and renting them, and youth groups being prepared in Europe and trained by Aliyat Noir, and disembarkment to the shore organized by the Ha'agana and later Palmach and Palyan. And what you can see here is a very typical site. You see people are getting offshore. People are having a rope here. The ship, it will never leave. They could not disembark people with boats because it was too dangerous. And so they placed a rope, and the Ma'apilim, the survivors of the Holocaust, simply made their way to the shore, hoping not to be caught. And as we speak of this, we have to mention at least one person, okay? Obviously, many brave, amazing people were involved. He was the leader. He was the chairman of Hamossad Le'aliyah Bet. His name was Shaul Me'irov. His son, he had a son, his name was Gur, and Gur was killed in a battle during the Independence War next to Moshav Beit Keshet in Lower Galilee. So he was abroad. He was in Europe at the time organizing Ma'apilim, and his wife, she sent him a telegram saying, I was alone when I delivered Gur. I raised him alone and I him alone. That's what she wrote to him. He came back to Israel, but I was too late for the funeral. And later he changed his last name to Avigur. Avigur means the father of Gur. And he was the Mossad agent.
We're having that 7,000 mile distance internet problem. It usually takes us a couple of seconds. She'll be back. Patience, please.
Yep. Looks like maybe she lost internet.
This has happened before. Everybody be patient. We are connecting 7,000 miles, and sometimes you can't even get around the block these days with the internet traffic that's on there. But give her a couple of minutes, she'll pop back in. Meanwhile, this site is a large barracks, if you walk the tour, and you can see where people were kind of compressed. It wasn't like a concentration camp, because it looked a little more organized and structured and had real beds and things like that. But it must have been a difficult time for a lot of families, young folks.
She should show that, Steve, when she goes through.
And next to it is this, just outside the immediate compound that's present today, is a DC-2 airplane, which is from the 30s. You rarely see a DC-2. Maybe you'll see a DC-3 because of military use, but that predates it by one generation, and I thought that was kind of interesting. So there's an airport near there, or there, as we now know.
I was there a few years ago on a Tiyul from Saro. It was very interesting, very interesting.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people miss this spot, and I don't know why. It's such a big part of history. What, Steve? Yeah. Sorry.
The VFI Plus tours have occasionally included the site. That's how I got there. And let's see, I don't.
Is the commando transport aircraft still there?
Hi guys, sorry, I lost you. You lost me.
No problem.
I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Let me get back to my my presentation. Okay, so I'm back. We are back. This is Beryl Katzenelson, and this guy deserves another presentation, but forget it. But what I just wanted you to see a paragraph out of an article he wrote in the newspaper the days, and he said, we ask for the main thing, Jews in the land, and he totally realized that they might have casualties, and if immigrants are shot, the ships are returned, so be it. This is the Jews' war over his country. You know, he did not fight actually, but he realized that it can happen, and they were ready to pay the price. Now we have just a few events, a few ships, which are so well known that I would like to mention them by their names. One is Patria. Patria was a ship which was loaded with ma'apilim from 3 other different ships which were caught by the British. And the British wanted to send Patria with about 1,800 ma'apilim on it, all the way to Indian Ocean to Mauritius. And then, the Yeshuv on its side decided to damage the engine of the ship in order to prevent it from sailing away. But they made a mistake, just a technical mistake. And so instead of damaging the engine, they made such a big hole that, as you can see right here, down here, this is the moment when Patria sank to the bottom of the sea. And 216 ma'apilim and 51 crew members and soldiers drowned. And this is the modern cemetery right next to Haifa, with the graveyard to the victims of Patria. That was a tragedy which questioned the whole idea of Haapala and the reaction to it on the Yeshuv side. And even today, there are people who, you know, they made a mistake. They were not supposed to try and damage the engine. And another tragedy, which has nothing to do with the Jewish efforts, this is the Struma. This is a story which, it's all written here, but it's so difficult to imagine that there was a ship which left Constanța in Romania on its way to Istanbul, and then on its way to the Mediterranean. And here we are talking about 1942, in the middle of the war. There was an engine failure. They could do nothing. They were towed into Istanbul, and nobody in the world wanted to accept these people. The British would not let them in. The Turks did not let them stay in Istanbul, even though there was a Jewish, the Jewish organization, Jewish community there, which was ready to welcome them. And eventually they were just towed into the water outside of the Turkish water. And the next day, the ship was drowned by a Russian submarine. That was the end of it, just because these people were not welcomed anywhere in the world. So the upper photo here, that's what Struma looked like. And down here, this is a memorial for Struma in Ashdod. This is a great story. This is another ma'apilim ship, which is called Sheptai Luzhinsky, but the original name of the ship was Susanna, and so people knew it as Shoshana. And it's a beautiful story about a ship of the ma'apilim which arrived to Nitzanim shore. Nitzanim is it's a bit north of the Gaza Strip, okay, south of Ashkelon. Anyhow, the sea was too rough. They could not use their boats, so they just got the ship as close as possible to the shore. and the Jews from the nearby kibbutz Nitzanim and other kibbutzim in the area, they came to the shore and joined the Ma'apilim, and therefore 3 hours later, when the British authorities arrived, they saw so many people. It was obvious that all of them are Jewish, but they could not tell who is Jewish from the Ma'apilim and who is Jewish from kibbutz Nitzanim, because none of them had any passports and no documents whatsoever. And being asked, who are you? All of them would answer one sentence, and that's Ani Yehudi mi'eretz Yisrael, which means I'm a Jew from the land of Israel. And so all of them were arrested. Most of them were sent to the detention camp in Cyprus. Some of them were Ma'apilim, others were local Israelis, some of them were returned later. It's a long story, but anyhow. This story became so well known because a great Israeli poet, Chaim Hefer, he wrote a song about this ship, a song which is called Shoshana, okay, not surprising. And somehow this song, well, you can see it on the left, okay, this is the translation of the word. And somehow this song became so famous that we all sang, like I remember myself in the Israeli Scouts as a teenager, we were singing this song like almost every week. None of us had any idea that we're singing about a sheep. We thought we're singing about a girl. Okay? But anyhow, we were happy. So I want us to listen to the song just because it's so famous. I hope I do. Just tell me if you can hear it.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. Okay. I have to share. Okay, wait a minute. I have to do. I have to share computer sound. And
Yeah.
I did it before, but since I lost the internet.
Yeah, click those 2 lower boxes in share screen.
To do what?
In share screen, there will be 2 boxes to check. One of them has to do with computer sound.
But I have to stop share screen, right?
No, it's in share screen. Well, I'm not sure.
It says leave computer audio, but no, I want to be in the computer audio, but somehow you don't. I have no idea. Let's see in a minute. I did it before, and I'll load it again. Well, I need my technical person. Just a second. I'm sorry. Uri?
Looks like she ran into that.
Hey guys, I'm sorry. Next time you will have a better specialist than myself. You have Shuki. זה פה, נכון? Okay. So, okay, now it should work. Let's try again.
Good.
Shoshana, Shoshana, Yahweh of Israel, Kamo Elayim Shoshana, Vayamod Yafli Kapitan, Hayayam Soter, Hadoren Harak, Hadom Hasfina, Kimat Venishrak, Havyoske Al Kol HaInyan Nitgaber, Vezemer Al Yisrael Zimer, Shoshana, 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 Yahweh of Israel, Kamo Elayim Shoshana, Vayamod Yafli Kapitan, ב-13 דם, ורימון כוסית, לפתע יגיעו ספינות על משתית, עדני אמר מעלה שנסתדר, וזמר על יסקו זימר,
got the idea, okay? That was so famous. When I asked Noam if he ever heard the song, he said no. So, you know, it's a different generation. But this is the song about Shoshana. Okay, and two great stories. And again, we have no time, maybe some other time. We are talking the Tehran children in 1943, over 1,000 Polish children which escaped from Poland when Poland was taken by Germany. They escaped to Russia, and from Russia to Syria, and some of them made it all the way to Karachi and Egypt and to Israel. And eventually they arrived to Israel. They were supported by the Aliyat Noor, the youth immigration, and distributed in the kibbutzim. Some of them were orphans. Some of them had one parent only. And what you can see here, these are the kids in the train, which finally brought them to Hadera, and then Atlit, and then to Haifa. And this is where they stopped, in the Hadera train station. And finally, and this is, well, I don't know what is the most amazing one, but this is the so-called operation of 1,000, Miftah Ha'elef. About 1,300 children from Syria, which was also organized by Hamossad Le'aliyah Bet. 1945 is when the Jews in Syria felt so threatened by the local Arabs, and so they illegally crossed the border from Syria into Israel through a beautiful natural reserve, which most of you probably know, and that's the Banyas and Dan. Okay, this is where they crossed the border, and what you can see here is one page out of a notebook with 930 names. You see, you have the last name, the first name, the name of the father, the age, and where did they go. And this notebook was kept by the person, the agent of Aliyah Bet, till he was about to pass away in 1997. And then he left this notebook with all these 930 names to his children, and only when he passed away the notebook was published. And then some kids, you know, old people from this notebook, and sometimes their descendants, they could find others from the same notebook, from the same operation. Now this gentleman here, you might recognize him, is quite famous. He used to be the chief commander of IDF. Right now he is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. His name is Gabi Ashkenazi. And the reason why he is here is because his mother was among the children of Operation 1000, and she immigrated here being 10 years old. So, you know, without this operation, we would probably have no Gabi Ashkenazi. So from the end of the war and until the declaration of the independence, we are talking, well, over 80,000 Ma'apilim. Again, we're talking about approximately, and this is the major phase of the Haapala. And here we are finally in the Ma'apilim detention camp. You can see the virtual background behind me. You can see the barbed wire. You can see the barracks. These barracks behind me, these are the barracks here on the left, and we will be entering one of these barracks quite soon. Hey Lana, I can see your cat. Neely, she participating. Okay. So welcome to Ma'apilim Detention Camp in Atlit. The detention camp was built in 1939 and started operating in 1940. And it was the largest detention camp in Israel till 1948. It was functioning a few years later, but not as a detention camp, of course, but we will get to it a bit later. Here you can see, well, a little map of the northern part. So this is Haifa up here, and Atlit and the detention camp are located some 10 miles south of Haifa, okay, near the beach, near a beautiful ruined Crusader citadel, which is the military base which belongs to the Israeli SEALs. Okay. So if you ever come here and then you cross the road to a little shopping mall and you walk to the second floor, because this is where bathrooms are, so then you can see that citadel and think about SEALs. Okay, we have to imagine, you know, it's really, it is difficult even when you actually tour the detention camp. It is impossible when you sit down in wherever you are looking at the Zoom presentation, but just try to imagine yourself as a ma'apil. Try to imagine yourself for a moment as an illegal immigrant which survived the Holocaust, which spent years in Europe, or maybe you just escaped from the Nazis and you definitely spent some time behind barbed wire, or you knew about it, and you're all scared, and you know, you are brought by most of them made it by train to the Atlit train station, which is still there, or by a military truck like that, or sometimes a bus. And the first thing you see is the barbed wire. And, you know, for most of them, it was a barbed wire again. So you see the wire, you see the barracks behind me. This is what they saw. And you see the watchtower. You see the watchtower, and you totally realize that the British gentleman in there, he doesn't like you, and he will do whatever he can to make sure that you go nowhere. So before we get too depressed, these are a few photos which were taken in Atlit Detention Camp when it was a detention camp. And as you can see, well, these people are not starving. And they actually, well, they look happy, you know? They look happy, they're dressed, they're smiling. They have lots of friends, boys and girls. Most of them are young, you know? There were some kids here, a few elderly people, but most of them they were young enough to have a future. And they did know that it is temporary. It is a detention camp. They realize that they're going to spend there maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe years, but they will leave. And that's what made the whole difference. Well, this is a bus. You cannot, I don't think you can see, but it could be locked from outside. So this is actually a cage which was used by the British to drive the Ma'apilim from either from Haifa port or from the train station. And here we are inside the detention camp. The watchtower is up here in the end, and in front of you, far distant, you can see the Carmel Mount. This is the mount of your dreams. You saw the Carmel as you approached the shore, and you were there. You touched the ground, and here you are imprisoned again. Just you know, each time I am there, I'm trying to connect to their feelings. But right now it is a museum. So right here you see we have a nice picnic area under a few big shady ficus trees. And we keep moving. You see this large grass lawn behind the barbed wire? Imagine that the whole thing has barracks on it. No grass lawn, just barracks all over the place. Now here on the left, this is where women were. And this path divided the camp into two parts. So ladies on the left and gentlemen are on the right. The reason why they wanted them to be separated is because they didn't want them to multiply. Because if a child is born in Palestine, so he is a legal citizen here. So they just didn't want any children. So men and women were separated, and they were allowed to meet approximately 2 hours a day in this like middle area. Okay. right? The first thing one would do as he would arrive to the detention camp will be approaching this structure. It looks very similar to the original one, even though it was restored in the mid-80s when it was prepared to become a museum. I don't know what it looks like to you, but I totally remember myself when I came here for the first time. I felt like I don't want to get in there. I don't like this building, okay? But, well, I had a choice. They did not have a choice. And so they did got in, and this is what they saw, okay? Again, speaking for myself for the first time, I had no idea what it is. Do you know what this is? What is this for? Yeah, Ilana?
Yeah, taking a shower and washing their clothes.
Exactly. So this is actually a gigantic washing machine, or better to say a steam purifier for the clothes. I don't know what they thought when they saw it, but again, they would just enter the place that's inside the building we just saw on the outside, and then men would take a right, ladies would take a left. Okay, so the ladies we took right. These are the showers. Okay, they knew that these are showers. I mean, we always think of the survivors of the Holocaust seeing these showers, and they all know what shower can be, but they already knew that these are real showers. They knew that they're gonna leave, but again, I'm sure that the associations there were horrible. So you walk in, you get undressed. This is the partly original ceiling. That's what it looked like. It's quite disgusting, I would say. And so you take your side, you get undressed, you place your clothes in this cupboard here, and then somebody who works in the camp would take them out from here and place them into the washing machine. The problem was that the steam actually killed the parasites and whatever bugs could possibly be in the cloth, and there were some of them definitely had bugs, but the steam made the cloth shrink. Some of them had something to wear later. Some of them had suitcases. Some of them had nothing at all. And then they had to find out if anybody of their party could give them something to wear. And quite often they had, you know, photos, little photos of their family who did not exist. And that's all they had, their only memory. And these photos were lost in that steam. But again, just not to make us too depressed, you see, we are still inside the shower. We passed the shower, and these are the photos which are now on the walls. Oops. Something wrong? Why it does not move? Okay, here we go. So you see the barbed wire, and you see the photos, again, some original photos from the camp. They were not originally on the walls of the shower building, of course, but this is for us to understand the atmosphere better. We have this big, tall British officer and some kids. We see the original barracks, and we have more kids. They're smiling. We see different faces because some of them might be, well, most of them were Europeans, but some of them came from Northern Africa, some of them all the way from Yemen. And here you see we have a guy with the Star of David on his back. It's not because they were forced to have the Star of David, okay? The British are not the Nazis, but this is the only jacket he had. So he never actually bothered to take the Star of David off, but you can see he's smiling. And further inside, this is something, I don't know why they didn't repair it, but this is a mikveh. Remember I told you that the detention camp was a camp until 1948, but later it was used as a ma'abara. Ma'abara is a temporary dwelling for the legal immigrants, which came in huge waves immediately after the Declaration of the Independence. And the very, very young state of Israel did not have enough room for them all. They did not have enough houses for them all. And so whatever they could, they used as a temporary dwelling, including the detention camp. And so this is a mikveh, which was used by whoever lived in this Ma'abara for a year or two. And then finally it was evacuated. People moved to other places, and it was abandoned. So the detention camp was abandoned for about 40 years until the state of Israel finally decided to make it into a museum dedicated, well, mainly to the story of the detention camp, but also to the story of Haapala in general. And so finally we took a shower. We are dressed in whatever we could. And now we are entering this barrack here. That's what it looks from inside. There were 86 barracks at the most. Sometimes there were more people inside, more Ma'apilim, sometimes less. It depended on how many ships arrived and how many Ma'apilim were on them. But right now, these barracks are not the original ones. The original did not survive, but they were built exactly as the original ones would look like. And right now in this barrack, there are about 20 beds, okay? 20 beds, while when it was too crowded, they would place up to 40 beds. Could you imagine how crowded it is? It's literally one sleeping, one next to the other, maybe one on top of the other. This is the men's barrack. You can see the suitcases. We immigrated back in 1977 from Russia, and we had exactly the same suitcase. Nothing changed. And my grandmother used to have the very similar sewing machine. And again, some photos which survived, and they were donated to the museum by some of the Ma'apilim who spent time in this camp. And these photos are from Europe, from before the war, from when things were yet normal. These pieces of wood, they are original. And here you can see the inscriptions, you can see the engravements which were made by the Ma'apilim. They really wanted to make sure that whoever there is, maybe somebody survived from the family, maybe somebody made it to Atlit, and that was the way for them to let others know that we are here. So sometimes you see names. This is Yosef Leib here, and sometimes you see a town of origin, Kolodno, here, and sometimes you would see a ship. The Ma'apilim ship they came on. In this case, this is Haganah. And here you can see Taf Ain, Torah, Avodah, that's for Bnei Akiva. People try to make a memorial for themselves and let others know that we made it. We're simply alive. And this is the cradle. This is not the original one, but it was placed here because it's similar to the cradles which were actually used by the women, because some of the Ma'apilot, they came being pregnant and they delivered in the camp. And actually the babies were, they were good. Well, learning and playing, they have plenty of free time. And luckily for them, and thanks to the British, they let local Jewish teachers, legal Jewish teachers, to come and teach them Hebrew and culture and dancing and singing and you name it. So this is a Hebrew class. You see it says Oniya. Oniya means sheep, and this is a sheep. And here it says Degel, and Degel is a flag. This is how they learn. And this is a checkers board, a checkers game. And you see what the checkers soldiers are made of? Well, it's impossible to tell, but they are made of, the white ones are made of bread, and the brown ones are made of chocolate cake. Okay, which means that these people were well enough fed, so they could afford playing with bread and chocolate cake, which is pretty, well, speaks for itself. This is probably the most famous prisoner ever imprisoned in Atlit Detention Camp, even though he spent only 4 days there. He is also known as the youngest child, the youngest survivor of Buchenwald concentration camp. He was called Lolik back then. This is a photo of Lolik being 8 years old when he was saved from Buchenwald. And this is same Lolik being much, much older. And he is Rabbi Israel Meir Lau, who became the chief rabbi of the state of Israel later on. So he spent 4 days in Atlit Detention Camp. Well, we cannot finish the story about the detention camp without mentioning this daring break to the detention camp. As you can see, the deputy commander was Yitzhak Rabin. He was young and handsome. This is a YouTube video, so you're welcome to watch. I wanted to watch together just about a minute and 20 seconds or so, just to look at the faces of the people who broke into the detention camp and rescued 208 Ma'apilim, which were about to be sent away from the land of Israel, and this is something they wanted to prevent. So let me let us move forward.
אני מחכה פה, מקלעים, ברנים היו לנו, מוכנים ממש לפתוח באש לכל כיוון, למנוע התערבות. אני רואה שקט כללי.
עם הכובעים של הנוטרים. והלכנו, את יודעת, עם המזוודה, בשקט, דממה, עד ירייה, שום דבר.
איך חדרנו? חיכינו ליד הגדר, מישהו מבפנים העיר לנו בפנס, סימן שאנחנו יכולים להיכנס, פרסנו את הגדר ונכנסנו.
אנחנו שומעים צעקות של השוטר הערבי ששמר עלינו, והוציאו אותנו לכביש הראשי של המחנה.
הלכנו לגדר, ומהגדר עברנו דרך שדה חרוש. עוד לא הגענו לכביש הראשי של חיפה תל אביב, ואנחנו מתחילים לראות פקלח שנזרקו, מעפילים שמפגרים, ילדים קטנים, ראיתי בלגן כללי.
מפעם לפעם נחום שריג עצר וביקש מהם ביידיש, חבר'ה, אולי תשאירו את המזוודות כאן, אנחנו מאוחר, עוד יאיר הבוקר, יתפסו אותנו. אבל החבר'ה האלה סחבו את המזכרות שלהם במשך כל שנות השואה באירופה, עד שהגיעו עם זה הנה, לא רצו לעזוב את המזוודות.
בדרך אמרו לזרוק את המזוודות. וזה הדבר הכי יקר שהיה לי, וזרקתי את כל היומנים, התמונות של אמי, זה הכי גרוע היה.
All right, so, well, it goes on, and I seriously recommend you to take 15 minutes after the presentation and look at it. There was one gentleman, Avraham Adan, the one who said that they were trying to convince them to drop the suitcases. And this guy, well, he was much, much younger back then. And 3 years, well, a bit over 3 years later, he became this guy. You know this picture. You saw the memorial in Eilat. A young man climbing on a stick in order to place the flag, the ink flag, in Rash Rash, and declare that Rash Rash, future Eilat, the Red Sea Gulf, belongs to the state of Israel. I don't know if you remember that story, but this is the same guy, Avraham Adan, or Bren, as he was called. So now I want us to address two amazing stories. One of them better known, the other one is less known, which are not necessarily connected to the detention camp, but the memorials and that story is told at the camp because, as I told you, it is a museum dedicated to Haapala. And before we start talking about these two stories, and I realize that we are getting late, this is just a little field of beautiful Israeli flowers, which are called chatzavim, chatzav. The English name is quill, I think. I don't think you have them in the States. They're just beautiful. And we have them every fall. Squill, yeah, that's the name. Okay, so one story I want to tell you briefly is the so-called Michaelberg operation. We are talking about two American pilots, American military pilots who survived Second World War, and they were still so energetic that they had a plane, the C-46 Commando plane. They contacted the Mossad and they said, hey guys, if you'd like, we have an airplane here. If you want, if you pay us well, we're willing to fly Jews for you from wherever you want to wherever you want. Okay, you just pay. That's a true story. And the Mossad didn't know whether they should trust these guys, and then they decided to trust them. And so the airplane, not this one, but same type, the airplane and the two pilots and this gentleman, who was 24 years at the moment, his name is Shlomo Hillel, they flew all the way from Israel to Baghdad in Iraq, and they brought 50 Jews, 50 illegal immigrants, air Ma'apilim. The airplane landed in a field near Yavniel, not far from the Sea of Galilee, and this is the photo which were taken when the Ma'apilim were evacuated from the plane. So we have 50 Ma'apilim flying in, and Shlomo Hillel, much later, of course, he became the chairman of the Knesset, and today he's 97 years old. Well, we have Yitzhak Rabin again, and this lady, I don't think you're familiar with her. Her name is she passed away. Her name was Shoshana Arbeli Al-Muslino, and she came on this airplane. She was one of the organizers in Baghdad of this crazy flight, and later she became the Minister of Health in Israel. So the airplane landed, and then the pilot and the airplane made it to Italy. In Italy, they met Ada Sireni. This lady, Ada Sireni, was the widow of Anto Sireni, one of the paratroopers which were sent to Europe by the Jewish Yishuv as part of the British Army. The most famous paratrooper was Chana Senesh. So Anto Sireni was a paratrooper with Chana Senesh. He was assassinated in Europe, and his widow was in charge of the Aliyah Bet in Italy. So Ada Sireni met the two pilots and the airplane, and she had a driver at the time, a driver who was originally from Kibbutz Dgania here in Israel, and he was there to help her with the Haapala. That driver was so astonished, he was so enthusiastic about the airplane, so he convinced her that he will become a pilot, and he's good enough to be a pilot, and so she convinced the Mossad to send him to a pilot's course. So he became a pilot, and that's him on the left. His name was Moti, by the way, and later he became a better pilot, and even better pilot, and finally he became the chief commander of Air Force, and his name is Moti Fine. He changed his last name to Moti Hod at some point, and he was the commander of operation called Moked, which is when the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Egyptian Air Force just before it took off at the very first morning of 6 Days War. So this is the connection between 6 Days War and Moti Hod and Haapala. And well, this is a ship which looks very similar to the ship which were used by the Ma'apilim. It is not a real Ma'apilim ship. It's called Galina. It was purchased for the needs of the museum. And it, generally speaking, it symbolizes the ship of the Ma'apilim. Nowadays, inside you have a nice movie. You sit down, you watch a movie about a Ma'apil, and then you walk to the second floor, and then there's the other part of the movie, and then the third, and so on and so forth. This is something we're not going to do today, but this is the right time for me just to mention the most famous ever Ma'apilim ship, which is the Exodus, of course, the ship that launched a nation. We have two different ships, and both deserve this name, the Mayflower and the Exodus. Very, very famous photos from Exodus, a ship which actually changed the destiny of the Ma'apilim and the international attitude towards the project. So, as you know, Exodus left from France. It sailed to here. It was followed and then stopped and then deported back to France. And then from there, they made all the way back to Germany, to the DP camps. And finally, the Ma'apilim came back to Israel only after the declaration of the independence. And just to mention a few people which had to do with it, Yitzhak Aran, the captain, John Stanley Gruel, a priest and volunteer, an American, who testified about the Ma'apilim and what happened, what actually happened on the Exodus in front of the UNSCOP committee. And, you know, in a way, he was the one who, well, he was not the only one, but the British and the UN was so much impressed by his testimony because he was Christian and he could not lie. And so that was another drop which facilitated the partition plan and the decision to let the Jews have a state of their own. Yosef Harel, the Haganah commander, and finally Paul Newman, no relative of mine, but without Paul Newman and without this movie and the book, of course, by Leon Uris, I don't know if you would all know about Exodus. And just before we finish, I have a personal moment here. This gentleman here, he's 94 years old. His name is Ezra Levinger, and he was one of the Ma'apilim of the Exodus. This is what it looks like today, and this is what it looked like shortly after he came to Israel. That photo was taken either 48 or 49, something like that. So he lived a long and happy life, and he moved to a kibbutz, and then he moved to Jerusalem, and then he met his wife, and then they had 3 children. His youngest daughter, her name is Yael, and she's my best friend. And well, these are some photos he took on Exodus. And Yael had 3 children. Her oldest daughter, her name was Romi. This is Romi. You can see this amazing smile of her. And this is Noam. This is my Noam. You know him a bit older. So here on this photo, he is about 5 and she's about 6. And they literally grew up together. They were best friends ever since they met when he was 3 and she was 4.5. And she was just beautiful from inside and outside, and I really, really loved her. And she was a dancer. She was so bright and so smart and so caring. And she was about to join a pre-military college, and 2.5 years ago, they went on a hike as part of the preparation for the college, and It was end of April 26th, and that was 2 days after a terrible rain, like in unheard of storm and flash floods. And I was guiding a VFI plus group in Jerusalem, and then I had a moment, and I heard that a paramilitary college was caught in the flash flood, and kids are missing. And the same night I knew that she died. She was killed in this flash flood. There were 10 of them, and Omi was one of them. So I dedicated this presentation to the loving memory of Omi. Thank you all, guys. That's it. You are welcome to unmute yourself, and I see that we have some chats here. So if you want to say something, I will look at the chat here. Okay, where did the money come from to fund? Oh, this is a good question. Well, from people like you guys. We had Jews donating money to the Jewish Agency from all over the world, and mainly United States. So this was the money which belonged to the Jewish nation, you know, same as so many projects which happen today in Israel. Okay, there is a U.S. Zionist group called Shoshana. This is funny. Okay, why did the people at a camp know? Okay, how did they know? Well, there were rumors. I mean, this is a very good question. I asked myself as well, like, how could people know there were no, you know, WhatsApp? But they did know, mainly after the war. After the war, and this is when most of the Mapilim arrived, they were organized by somebody, you know. There were people from Aliyah Bet from Israel, which were sent to Europe to organize the Mapilim and send them to the ship, etc. So they knew about the detention camps. They knew that chances are that they will be arrested and it will be all right. So they did have the information. I'm not saying that they were not scared and terrified. Definitely they were, but it was not, it was less terrible than it could be. Okay. Okay, so people who, about half of the Mapilim were actually sent away. Most of them were sent to Cyprus, which was also under the British mandate, and they had large detention camps in Cyprus. And they had detention camps in Mauritius. And some were sent, in the end of the war, they were sent back to Europe, like the Mapilim of Exodus, which was sent back all the way to the same DP camps they came from. So yeah, it is a nightmare. I mean, and it is amazing that people survived and made a living. And, you know, we have these funds for the survivors of the Holocaust. And sometimes people ask themselves, like, shall we still fund them? You know, it happened so long ago. But I think that these people were so deeply traumatized by whatever happened. That some of them made great and others, you know, much less so. Okay, one of the U.S. Pilots was El Schwimmer. Well, maybe this is somebody else, because we have the two pilots I mentioned. One his name was Michael, and the other one was called Wassenberg. And we know nothing about these guys. I mean, this is so weird, but they flew 150 Jews altogether, 2 flights from Baghdad and 1 from Italy. And then they just took off and disappeared. And I know that the museum in Atlit, they were trying to find them. They tried to, you know, realize who these people are, maybe talk to them. One of them was probably killed in an air crash in the 60s in Yemen. And the other one just disappeared. So if you have any idea about Michael and Wassenberg, two Jews back in 1947, by a tiny little airplane. So just let us know, because we don't know, and we wish we knew. Okay, what was the general British plan of the detention camp? It was to keep people inside. Yeah, okay. For how long exactly? Well, this is a good question again. Look, the British, again, they did not plan to kill them. They did not plan to. Bye, Esther. Bye. See you again.
No, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So the plan was the following. You see, the British were willing to let Jews in, but only according to that quota of 70,000 Jews, 75,000 certificates in 5 years. And so they simply released these certificates little by little by little. So they would keep the people inside, sometimes, again, for weeks, sometimes for months, not more than that. And then they would let them in legally with a certificate. That means that other Jews could not come legally because the certificates were already gone, because they divided the certificate into time frames. Okay, so all they had to do is to wait in the camp up until, you know, some certificates are available. So again, it was a temporary thing. May her memory be a blessing. Definitely so. Okay, and then we have.
You have a picture.
Oh, Steve.
Wait.
Yeah. Steve, bye. Hi. Yeah, Steve. Yes, you were with me. I will never forget that night in Ramada Hotel in Jerusalem. It was a sleepless night, and then we met again next morning, and we drove to Harodi, and it was like in a different life, and it is a different life ever since, you know. And the reason, no trial, actually, they were not yet punished. We are 2.5 years later. And they're still, I mean, the people who committed the crime, the people who took them to Nahal Tzafit, even though they knew that the flash flood is on, they're still at home. One of them actually had a baby just a few months ago. Who composed the quota? Well, the quota was something the British decided upon. This was part of the third white paper, the white paper of McDonald's, as it is known. And this is something, I guess, the British believed that the Arabs will be willing to accept, something like that. But it was that was a British decision. All right. So, guys, if you have any further questions, or if you'd like to say something, I will really appreciate it. Otherwise, I would like to invite you to our next presentations and tours. As you know, we keep doing it. The coronavirus does not go away, so we have plenty of time. So next presentation this Tuesday will be by Shuki Ben Anat. You've heard him, some of you probably heard him already. He was talking about Lebanon and Hezbollah. That was shortly after the explosion in Beirut. And this time he will be talking about the other neighbor north, and this is Syria. So me personally, I'm looking forward to this presentation, and I hope you will join me for this one. And then Thursday, we will have a Sukkot tour. So we will be talking to people and visiting Sukkot. I'm not sure yet where exactly, because again, it depends on the lockdown and what the restriction gonna be in a week. Nobody knows. But we will have a Sukkot tour, that's for sure. And then we have different presentations. We will have a speaker from the Technion who will talk about Israel as startup nation and innovations and other interesting topics. And as a Technion representative, I'm sure he will have lots of information for us. We will be visiting the home of the first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, which is located inside Weizmann Institute. So we will have a tour of his house, which became a museum, of course. And I hope we will be able to make it to Akko. I really, really hope so. And we will have a presentation about wildlife and birds, and I'm not sure what else, but we have everything scheduled from now till the end of the month, and we have a few presentations which will happen later. So you're very much welcome, and I hope to see you again. And donations are appreciated as always. And thank you for letting me sharing my personal connection to the Haapala.